Tataki. We start with tataki. While it sounds like a culinary term today, in the 17th century, it was the standard punishment for petty theft and brawling. The prisoner was stripped and beaten with a whip made of 3 braided hemp ropes, soaked in water to make them heavy and stiff. There were 2 grades, karutataki, 50 lashes, and otataki, 100 lashes. Executioners were experts. They knew exactly how to strike so the skin would split without killing the victim immediately. The goal wasn't just pain, it was the irazumi on Kodi. After the whipping, criminals were often tattooed on their arms with black rings. In a society built on honor, these criminal marks meant you could never hold a job or get married again. You were a walking warning sign. Tsuiho. In feudal Japan, your identity was tied to your family and your village. Tsuiho, or banishment, stripped that away. There were various levels. Edobarai meant you were kicked out of the capital. Ento meant you were sent to a remote island like Hachihojima. You were legally removed from the temple registers, essentially deleted from existence. You couldn't own property, and your family was forbidden from speaking to you. Many banished individuals ended up as hainin, non-humans, living in slums and begging for scraps. To the Japanese mind, being alive but forgotten by your ancestors was a fate worse than a quick death. Hinin Taikei. This was the ultimate social punishment. For certain crimes of morality or impurity, a person could be officially reclassified as hinin, literally not human. The Japanese caste system was rigid. By being labeled hinin, you lost all legal protections. If a samurai killed you on the street, it wasn't considered murder. It was more like clearing away a stray animal. You were forced to work the unclean jobs, handling leather, disposing of carcasses, or assisting in executions. Your children would be born into this status. It was a hereditary curse of shame that lasted for generations, ensuring your bloodline remained in the shadows of society. Kamayude, the famous woodblock print of Ishikawa Gomen holding his son in a large iron pot. Now we move into capital punishment. Kamayude is legendary because of one man, the bandit king Ishikawa Gomen. The criminal was placed in a large iron cauldron, a kama, filled with oil or water. A fire was lit beneath it. Unlike a quick beheading, the death was agonizingly slow. In 1594, Gomen was sentenced to this for a failed assassination. History says he held his young son above his head to save the boy from the boiling oil for as long as his strength lasted. It was a punishment designed to show that even the most heroic rebel was nothing more than meat in the eyes of the law. Ushizaki. Similar to the European drawn and quartered, Ushizaki was reserved for high treason, or those who attempted to harm the shogun's inner circle. The prisoner's arms and legs were tied to 4 strong oxen. At a signal, the oxen were driven in opposite directions. Human joints are remarkably strong. It often took several attempts and significant time for the limbs to be torn from the torso. This wasn't just an execution, it was a mechanical display of the state's power to literally pull a person's life apart. It was so gruesome that even the hardened crowds of Edo often watched in absolute silence. Hiburi. In a city like Edo, where houses were made of wood and paper, fire was the greatest fear. Arson was the ultimate crime. The punishment for arson was hiburi, burning at the stake. The most famous case was 16-year-old Yaoya Oshichi. She started a small fire hoping to see a boy she loved again, but the flames grew out of control. The prisoner was paraded through the city on a horse for hours so everyone could see their face. Then they were tied to a stake wrapped in straw. Unlike some European burnings where smoke inhalation killed the victim, the Japanese method often used smaller amounts of fuel to ensure the victim felt the heat of the flames for as long as possible. Gakuman. Gakuman was a 2-part punishment, an execution followed by a public desecration. Reserved for shameful crimes like robbery, murder, the criminal was first beheaded. Their head was then taken to a public prison gate and placed on a wooden pedestal. A spike was driven through the jaw to keep the head upright. In Japanese culture, the body must be whole for a proper burial. By separating the head and displaying it to be pecked by crows and mocked by passers-by, the state denied the criminal any peace in the afterlife. Their family was forbidden from reclaiming the head for 3 days, forcing them to watch their loved one rot in public. Haritsuke. Crucifixion in Japan wasn't like the Roman version. It was faster but much bloodier. The prisoner was tied to a T-shaped cross. 2 executioners would stand on either side with long spears. Yari. They would rhythmically thrust the spears through the prisoner's flanks, crossing each other in the middle, piercing the lungs and heart. It was a performance of precision. The final thrust was always through the throat. This was the mandatory punishment for killing one's master or a parent, crimes that violated the Confucian filial piety that held the Shogunate together. It was designed to look like a ritual, turning the executioner into a surgeon of death. Nokogiri Biki. This is widely considered the most sadistic punishment in the Tokugawa legal code. It was reserved for the murder of a lord or a high official. The criminal was paraded through the streets for days, their bodies sliced with small cuts. Then they were buried in a hole in the ground with only their heads sticking out. Two bamboo saws, smeared with the blood of the victim, were placed on either side of the head. Passers-by were legally invited to take a turn with the saw. Over the course of 2 days, the public literally participated in the slow sawing of the victim's neck. By the mid-Edo period, this became symbolic. People rarely actually used the saw, but the victim still had to sit there for 48 hours, knowing that any person walking by had the right to end their life in the most painful way possible. Forced seppuku. You might be surprised to see seppuku at number 1. Isn't it honorable? Not when it's a sentence. For a samurai, forced seppuku was the ultimate psychological torture. When a samurai committed a crime, he was granted the right to take his own life to preserve his family's honor. If he refused, his family would be executed and his property seized. Imagine the mental fortitude required. You had to sit perfectly still, dressed in white, and plunge a blade into your own stomach, slicing left to right and then upward. You had to remain silent and composed. If you flinched or cried out, it was considered a clumsy death, bringing shame to your ancestors. Even though a second Kaishakunin was there to behead you, the moments leading up to the cut, the ritualistic cleaning, the writing of a death poem were a cold, calculated psychological execution that no other culture has ever replicated. That's all, nerds. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.